The two faces of the Portland Trailblazers. That's what we need to talk about today. Portland Trailblazers have had a poor performance against the Kings, a thrashing of the Phoenix Suns, and then they got thrashed themselves by the LA Clippers. And of course, this is only 3 games into the year. But it's been a very odd start for Portland. They've been really good, they've been really bad, they've had some struggles, and they're still showing signs of some concerns that I've had for them in the past and going into this season that is going to lead to them just being a mediocre playoff team at best for the upcoming season. And so I want to talk about their start to the year, what I expect from them moving forward, and ultimately what this could mean for this roster moving forward. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about the two faces of the Portland Trailblazers. The Portland Trailblazers have shown their brilliance and have also shown their ability to just not be good throughout the start of this NBA season. That's headlined by the fact that they lost to the Sacramento Kings 124-121 at home. They then decided to beat the Suns 134-105, with the Suns being one of the best teams in the league. And then they lost 116-86 by the Clippers. And note, the Clippers do not have Kawhi Leonard. That is a Paul George-led team on a night where the Trailblazers had 30 turnovers. 30 turnovers. That is never excusable, ever. That is absolutely outrageous. And that's just lack of effort, lack of care, lack of discipline. And it's just not acceptable. It really isn't. And so, of course, Damian Lillard hasn't played great to start the year. He's only hit 2 threes on the year. Hasn't been overly efficient. CJ's been leading the way. CJ's the top 5 scorer in the league right now in terms of points per game. Norm Powell is out with an injury right now, so they didn't have him for the Clippers game. He is day-to-day. But ultimately, let's talk about the good of the Portland Trailblazers. But then we'll talk about the bad and why they've had some bad moments this year. And also what it could mean for them long term, and why they haven't been as successful the last couple of years, and why I don't think they'll be as successful this year as they have been in years past. So ultimately, it's like you say, you lose to the Kings at home, which is not a game you can really lose when you're hoping to make the playoffs. As much as the Kings will hope to get into the play-in games, Portland will look to hopefully be a top 6 seed this year and avoid the play-in games. This is not really an excusable loss, but it's a scenario where this team goes as Dame goes. And even though CJ is here and Norm is here, unless those guys are shooting ridiculous clips from the field, unless Damian Lillard is on his A game, this team doesn't win point blank, period. And sure, you can say that about a lot of teams, but Portland aren't happy about getting into the playoffs and just losing in the first round anymore. That's why there was so many talks about Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum getting traded this offseason. Because they're tired of doing that. They've done that for the last 5 years now, and they don't want to continue to just get into the first round and then lose. And ultimately, sure, there's teams that also are going to struggle without their top guy going, but for Portland, like I said, it's more than just getting in. They want to do more, and so ultimately for them to be able to do more, Damian Lillard has to be insane, while CJ McCollum and Powell are insane, while their defense has to be good, which just doesn't really exist on this team. And so the scenario with this group is that Damian Lillard has to be on his A game just for them to get into the playoffs, period, whether it's via the playing games or not, because this Western Conference is just so strong and so deep, and so they are so heavily reliant on one player that it makes it tough. You look at some of the other teams around the league, you look at a team like Phoenix. If Chris Paul goes out, they have Booker. If Booker goes out, they have Paul. They also have Ayton. They also have Bridges. If you look at Brooklyn, KD goes out, they have Harden. They have that other guy. Bucks, Giannis goes out, they have Middleton. Sure, it's not like-for-like replacement, and they're still going to struggle, but they have another guy that can truly lead the way for them. Even the Clippers now. Kawhi is out, Paul George is leading the way, and the Clippers are doing fine to start the year. Would they be better with Kawhi Leonard? Sure, but they're still fine and are going to be a competitive team. If the Trailblazers didn't have Damian Lillard for 2 months, I would have genuine concerns about their ability to stay anywhere near 500. I would. And as I think most people would, because Damian Lillard is the engine of this team. And this is not a knock on Damian Lillard. This is, Damian Lillard gets all the credit. He's a leader on this team. But when he struggles or is out, it's tough. And we've seen that so far this year as he has struggled offensively, and it's resulted in things going tough for them. We've also seen that in the Clippers game, down to 30 turnovers. I mean, that's not going to repeat itself. But I mean, literally everyone who touched the floor, and I mean literally everyone who touched the floor for Portland against the Clippers had a turnover. Everyone had a turnover. How does that happen? Everyone who played, all 12 players who played had a turnover. Nurkic took as many shots as he had turnovers. He took 6 shots and had 6 turnovers. That is just not excusable. I don't care if it's early on in the year. You're a pro, you're a center. You need to figure that stuff out. Like, things need to be better than that. And like I said, I'm sure it won't repeat itself. But this is just a very poor display. And sure, the Clippers' defense is good. Paul George was an absolute ball hawk out there. They had 21 steals. Terrence Mann was ball hawking just as Winslow. But 30 turnovers? Come on, man. Like, this is not a team that should be in that type of realm. Their starting lineup sure had Nazir Little, but he only had 1 turnover himself, and he played the most minutes of anyone on the night. But Nurkic, Lillard, McCollum, Covington, like, these are vets, man. They've played with each other for over a year now. Nurkic, Lillard, and McCollum much longer. They need to figure it out better than that. It's just not acceptable. It's really not. But positives before we get back to the most glaring negative and a bit more in-depth thought on why they won't have the level of success that they hope for. The positives is that when their offense is going, they can't be stopped. Against the Suns, Dame had his best shooting performance of the year, 6-11 from deep to 6-11 from the field, 2-7 from deep. Norm put up 16 in 12 minutes all early on. CJ put up 28. Anthony Simons was hitting off of the bench, putting up 4 threes. Nazir Little was doing his thing, and they played good enough defense to allow the Suns to only shoot 32% from deep, that they were just comfortably through on the night. They kept their turnover numbers down. They were assisting with 24 in the night. They were a very well-oiled machine and efficient on the offensive end. And when the Portland Trailblazers are going at that high of a level, between Norm, Dame, CJ, and Anthony Simons off of the bench, with that level of shooting, they're tough to stop. Very tough to stop. And even one of the best teams in the league, Phoenix Suns, struggled against them on the night. But ultimately, the biggest downside to the Portland Trailblazers is their defense. It continues to be, it has been, and it doesn't look like that's changed this past season. Let me highlight why I think the Portland Trailblazers have not been anywhere near as good. Well, I know why they haven't been as good the last couple of years and why I think they won't be as good again this year to get any further than getting into the first round and then going home. The last time the Portland Trailblazers got past the first round was in the 2018-19 season. They beat the Thunder 4-3. They beat the Nuggets, or they beat the Thunder 4-1, pardon me. Beat the Nuggets 4-3, and then lost via sweep to the Warriors. In that season, the Portland Trailblazers had the 16th best defensive rating in the league. Not amazing, but in and around top half. Since that season, in the 2019-20 season, they were the 27th ranked. In the 2020-21 season, they are the 29th ranked. And although on a very small sample size, so far in this season, they are right at the bottom again in the 28th ranked defensive rating team. It doesn't bode well. It really doesn't. The defense is what holds this team back. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, not great defenders. Norman Powell, way too undersized for the small forward spot, and even at the shooting guard spot is not a great defender, average at best. Robert Covington is still fine, but not an amazing lockdown man-on-man guy, and is nowhere near as good as he was a few years ago with Minnesota or with Houston. And Yusuf Nurkic is fine, but he's not some elite rim protector by any stretch either. When you look at their bench, they're not exactly filled with a bunch of amazing defenders either. Anthony Simons is one of the worst defenders in the league. Cody Zeller is nothing great. Larry Nance and Nazir Little are fine there. But this is a very poor defensive group that needs their offense to be elite night in, night out. And that's fine in the regular season to get you to the playoffs, but that just doesn't roll in the playoffs unless you are an extremely elite offense. Like you're talking about the Nets last year, even this year, I wouldn't say that they're elite enough to not work on the defensive end. or like the Golden State Warriors with KD, because when it was pre-KD, they were one of the best defenses in the league, and they still were good with KD, but they didn't have to be an elite defense for them to be able to compete. But ultimately, the Trailblazers have only been good when they've had a good defense, and that's just a fact. With this poor defense, they're just going to continue to be a team that gets into the playoffs or is right on the bubble of getting into the playoffs as the West continues to improve. And that's just going to be it. They just don't have the defense to be able to get it done. They just don't. I don't have enough faith in this group. Their defense has just deteriorated from being Al-farouq Aminu, Maurice Harkless on the wings, and giving them that level of defense that they needed and was required on this group, and what gave them some level of success. And since then, it just hasn't been to that same caliber. They haven't had that level of team defense. And it ultimately just leads in a scenario where Portland could look really good some nights in the regular season, really bad some nights in the regular season, as we have seen to the two extremes early on in the 2021-22 season, and ultimately are likely to just flounder out in the first round. But that is my thoughts on the Portland Trailblazers so far this year and heading into the rest of the 2021-22 season. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below about what you think of this Portland Trailblazers season so far and what you expect from them this season. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.